at 25 degrees centigrade and at 1 atmosphere is arbitrarily fixed at 0. So delta H formation, if it is negative, then the compound is called exothermic compounds. And if the delta H formation is positive, then the compounds are called endothermic compounds. And you know the delta U is equal to, that is the internal energy change is equal to the heat supplied at a constant volume condition. Delta H is equal to the heat supplied at constant pressure condition. So I can relate the delta H and delta U as delta H is equal to delta U plus P into delta V. So it can be written as QP is equal to QV plus P into delta T, delta V, and P into delta V, that is pressure into change in volume, can be written as delta N RT. So QP is equal to QV plus delta N RT. Up to this we have seen. Now listen, we are going to discuss an important equation called Kirchhoff's equation. Actually, the Kirchhoff's equation speaks about the change of enthalpy with the temperature. You can see here, let us take a reaction. A plus B is going to become CC plus DD. Let me say this is the equation taken. Now the enthalpy change delta H is equal to the enthalpy of all products put together minus the enthalpy of all the reactants. So enthalpy of the products can be written as C times the enthalpy of the component C plus D times the enthalpies of the component D. So this is the total enthalpy of the product minus A times the enthalpy of A plus B times the enthalpy of B, put together the total enthalpy of the reactants. And if you subtract, that will be the enthalpy change of the reaction. Now, differentiating the above equation with respect to temperature, dou delta H by dou T, I am differentiating this particular part. Dou delta H by dou T at a constant pressure is equal to C times dou Hc by dou T at a constant pressure plus D times dou Hd by dou T at constant pressure minus A times dou Ha by dou T at a constant pressure minus B times dou Hb by dou T at a constant pressure. Actually, dou H by dou T is Cp. This we have already seen. Dou U by dou T is Cv. Dou H by dou T is Cp. So it is C times the Cp of C plus D times the Cp of D minus A times the Cp of A minus B times the Cp of B. When you do all these calculations, what you are getting is delta Cp. That means the total Cp of the product minus the total Cp of the reactant. You are getting the change in the Cp, that is the heat capacity at a constant pressure. So dou delta H by dou T at a constant pressure is equal to delta Cp. This equation is called Kirchhoff's equation. So the variation of delta H of a reaction with the temperature is equal to the variation of the heat capacity at a constant pressure of the system. So this can be expressed in other ways, like d delta H is equal to delta Cp dt. This is how it is written. D delta H is equal to delta Cp dt. Now, look here. So it becomes d delta U is equal to delta Cv into dt. Now for small temperature ranges, I can integrate between two temperature limits, T1 and T2. So T1, T2, d delta H is equal to, as our previous derivation goes on, integral T1, T2, delta Cp dt. Here the delta Cp can be taken out. So the equation becomes integral T1, T2 dt. So when you apply the upper and the lower limits for this integration, delta H2 minus delta H1, that means the change of enthalpy at the temperature T1, the change of enthalpy at the temperature T2, when you subtract this, that will be equal to delta Cp, the total change in the heat capacity at a constant pressure, multiplied by T2 minus T1. Similarly, you can do the integration part for internal energy, which is delta U2, that is internal energy change at a temperature 2, minus internal energy change at a temperature 1 is equal to change in the heat capacity at a constant volume into T2 minus T1. Now you know one thing, in a temperature range, when the temperature range is not small, it is of a very big range, then we have to make some approximation. So the Cp can be written in the form of alpha plus beta T plus gamma T square plus and so on, it goes. So when you substitute the Cp in the place of delta Cp here, what will happen? The entire term comes into the picture. Delta alpha, delta beta T plus delta gamma T square, everything comes into the picture. Now what happens? The Cp itself becomes a function of temperature. Therefore, that will also be integrated. So when you complete all the integrations, what you are getting is delta H2 minus delta H1 equal to delta alpha T2 minus T1 plus 1 by 2 delta beta T2 square minus T1 square plus 1 by 3 delta gamma T2 power 3 minus T1 power 3. And this equation is called integrated Kirchhoff equation. So ultimately the Kirchhoff equation is relating, there is a change in the internal energy change, or there is a change in the heat capacity change when the temperature changes. There's a change in the internal energy change when the temperature changes, and there is a change in the enthalpy change when the temperature changes. So these are all related by the Kirchhoff's equation. Now you can see, look at this picture. Right. You should understand what is maximum flame temperature. Normally combustion is an adiabatic process. When you are burning something, it is assumed that there is no heat energy enters into the system. So combustion is an adiabatic process. The maximum temperature attained by the flame zone, where the flame zone is containing the resultant gases due to the heat liberated by the combustion of the fuel under adiabatic conditions at a constant pressure is known as maximum flame temperature. See, we are using gas stoves, kerosene stoves, and many other stoves with different fuels. In all these cases, we assume that the burning takes place in the adiabatic condition. So after combustion of the fuel, what is coming out is the resultant gas molecules, normally carbon dioxide. And the temperature that is observed in the heat zone, the flame zone, with all its resultant gases in adiabatic condition at a constant pressure is called maximum flame temperature. Now, as isobaric adiabatic process, isobaric means where the pressure is maintained constant. Adiabatic means where the Q supplied is 0. Now, in this case, we have already seen that d by dt of delta H is equal to delta Cp. So I can write d delta H is equal to delta Cp dt. Simply, I have transferred this dt to that side. So when I integrate this, integral d delta H is equal to delta Cp integral Ti to Tf. Ti means initial temperature, Tf means the final temperature, and dt. Now delta H is equal to delta Cp T final minus T initial. Here the delta Cp corresponds to the resultant gases plus unreacted nitrogen. This is what is very important, because when a flame is burning, it is containing all the resultant gases after burning. And as it is taking the oxygen molecule in the atmosphere and it burns, what is left in the atmospheric air is 78% nitrogen. So the nitrogen is also playing an important role in changing the heat capacity of the resultant gases. So the delta Cp is not only confined to the gaseous molecules produced by burning of the fuels, it also includes the unreacted nitrogen in the atmospheric air. So the Cp is supposed to be sigma Cp, which includes the heat capacity at a constant pressure of all the gaseous products obtained by burning the fuel plus the atmospheric nitrogen. So making all these adjustments, I take the initial temperature as 25 degrees centigrade, that is 298 Kelvin. So the final temperature, what you have noted down, it has to be added with 298. So with the experimental or calculated temperature. So see, the product at 298 Kelvin, it is getting raised to the final temperature, and the delta H heating, it has to be added with delta H 298, which is already existing. So when it is added, what you are getting is 0. So for an adiabatic process, enthalpy change is 0. If the delta H is replaced by delta U, then the pressure required for the reaction is called maximum explosion pressure. So at this point, you have to understand what is the maximum flame temperature and the maximum explosion pressure. So maximum flame temperature is different and the maximum explosion pressure is different. For maximum flame temperature, we take the heat capacity of the gaseous products and the atmospheric nitrogen into consideration, and the enthalpy change is considered. If internal energy change is taken for the calculation, and the maximum pressure is measured, that pressure is called maximum explosion pressure. Now, we are going to another important topic called Hess's law of heat summation. Look here. Suppose I take a continuous process where a reactant A is getting converted into a product B, and then B gets converted into C, and then C gets converted into D. Now, there is another process where A is directly converted into D. Let me say Q1 is the heat change accompanying the process A to B, and Q2 is the heat energy accompanying the process B to C. Q3 is the energy accompanying the process C to D. If it is so, then A to D, the heat energy accompanying the process directly from A to D will be equal to Q1 plus Q2 plus Q3, whatever may be the number of steps taken. Now you look at the statement, you will understand. The Hess's law of heat summation states that the amount of heat evolved or observed in a process, including a chemical change, is the same whether the process takes place in one or several steps. Now the enthalpy of a reaction depends only on the initial reactants and the final products, and not at all on the intermediate products that may be formed. It is also independent of the path or the manner in which the change is brought about. So this is the entire picture of the Hess's law. Now look, these are the applications of the Hess's law. This is a very important concept you should understand. The first application is the calculation of enthalpies of reactions. Now see, I am taking solid carbon and I supply half a molecule of oxygen and I'm getting carbon monoxide. What is the enthalpy change accompanied with this reaction? We don't know. And also we don't have any direct method to measure this enthalpy change. The reason is such a partial oxidation of a carbon is not possible experimentally. When you supply oxygen, automatically the tendency of the reaction is to form carbon dioxide, leaving some of the carbons unreacted. But exactly supplying half the requirement of the oxygen and to convert it into carbon monoxide, it is not possible. But I can measure the enthalpy change accompanying the complete burning of carbon in oxygen to form carbon dioxide, and also the complete burning of carbon monoxide and oxygen to form carbon dioxide. These two enthalpies are measurable experimentally, but this enthalpy we cannot measure experimentally. But using the Hess's law, I can calculate this. That is why the reaction is written like this. Look here, carbon combining with half molecule of oxygen to form carbon monoxide, the enthalpy change is not known. But a carbon monoxide combining with half molecule of oxygen to form carbon dioxide, enthalpy is known to be minus 282.0 kilojoule. At the same time, carbon combining with oxygen to form carbon dioxide, the total enthalpy is also known. According to Hess's law of heat summation, whether the process takes place in a single step or in several steps, the total enthalpy change will be the same. So if I assume this to be x plus minus 282 will be equal to minus 393.5. So having this statement, I'm able to find out that x is equal to minus 111.5 kilojoule. So the enthalpy change accompanying this process of converting carbon solid into carbon monoxide is minus 111.5 kilojoule. This is one of the applications of Hess's law. Now, there are some reactions which are very slow. For these slow reactions, we are not able to find out the enthalpy change. Say, for example, the transition reactions. Sulfur rhombic will get converted into sulfur monoclinic, which are two different crystalline forms of sulfur. Interconversion is very much possible. At the same time, sulfur monoclinic can be converted into sulfur rhombic. But what is the enthalpy change accompanying this transition change? It is not measurable. But Hess's law finds its application in finding out the enthalpy change of the slow processes. Look here, when I burn sulfur rhombic in oxygen to form sulfur dioxide, the enthalpy change is minus 297.5 kilojoule. When I burn sulfur monoclinic in oxygen to form sulfur dioxide, the enthalpy change is minus 300.0 kilojoule. I have to calculate sulfur rhombic to sulfur monoclinic, the conversion enthalpy change accompanying. Now I can write this reaction like this: sulfur rhombic plus oxygen to form sulfur dioxide. Look here, it is minus 297.5. Similarly, the same sulfur dioxide can be arrived at by burning sulfur monoclinic and oxygen, which is minus 300.0. Suppose if this sulfur dioxide is converted into sulfur monoclinic and oxygen, it will be plus 300. Is that right? So when I revert this one, sulfur dioxide to monoclinic and oxygen, it will be plus 300. So as a whole process, I can take like sulfur rhombic to sulfur monoclinic. So which will be minus 297.5 plus 300 will give plus 2.5 kilojoule. So sulfur rhombic to sulfur monoclinic, the delta H is equal to plus 2.5 kilojoule. Sulfur monoclinic to sulfur rhombic, it will be minus 2.5 kilojoule. So this is how the enthalpy change accompanying the transition changes can be observed. Now look here, one more application is there. Look at this application. This is very important one. Enthalpy of a formation. I have already told you what is enthalpy of formation. Enthalpy of formation is what is the enthalpy change accompanying formation of a compound from its constituent atoms. Now look here, I want to find out the enthalpy of formation of benzene. C6H6 in liquid form. When it is burnt, so enthalpy of a formation, C6H6 is 7.5 oxygen to give 6 carbon dioxide plus 3 water molecule. The enthalpy change is minus minus 3267.7 kilojoule. But when you burn carbon alone, you are getting minus 393.5 kilojoule. When you burn hydrogen alone, you are getting minus 286.2 kilojoule. But when you burn the benzene, 6 carbon atoms are burnt and 3 hydrogen molecules are burnt. So what would be the enthalpy change when 6 carbon atoms are burnt? You can multiply this value by 6 and you are getting minus 2361.0 kilojoule. When 3 molecules of hydrogens are burnt, you can multiply this by 3 and it is minus 858.6 kilojoule. So when you add this, you are getting, when you add this and this, you are getting 3219.6 kilojoule. So this must be the enthalpy of combustion when 6 carbon and 6 hydrogens are burnt. But originally, it is found to be minus 3267.7 kilojoule. It is a little bit higher. So what is the difference? You take the calculated value and subtract the actual burning value. And the difference is a plus 48.1 kilojoule, which is the enthalpy of a formation of benzene. So the excess heat energy that is coming out when it is originally burnt, that much energy is actually holding the carbon and the hydrogen together in the form of benzene. So with this, we come to the end of this class. I suppose I have told you everything. Yeah, it's finished. Now I disconnect the meeting and you rejoin.